Allie Reid, are you totally jet lagged? Because didn't you just get home from Japan?
Yeah, I think it's been a couple of days. I'm trying to readjust to the time zone here. And I'm exhausted, but I'm so happy to be back. Japan was amazing, but obviously it's good to be back at work too. So it's kind of like a 50-50 feeling right now, I guess.
Yeah, you've been back for a couple days now.
Yeah, yeah. A 14-hour flight isn't for the faint of anyone. It's the faint of heart for sure. But uh, Japan was amazing. The culture, the people are amazing. But I was ready to get back to work, and I'm glad that I'm back because hurricane season is in full swing. So here we
Whew,
go.
it sure is.
Yeah.
And I knew about your trip to Japan because of all your social media, but from your social media, I also knew it seemed like you always wanted to do news even from a young age. Is that
Yes.
true? Tell me about that.
Yeah. I always say, and so many people say, well, how can it be true that you've known your entire life that this is what you've wanted to do? Because it's so, you just don't get that nowadays. And to be honest, it's more common to not know what you're going to do. And that has become the norm, and that's very accepted nowadays. And that's totally okay. But at the age of 5, my mom had a birthday party for me. My mom and dad had a birthday party for me at what's a place called like the Please Touch Museum. It's a little kids museum, like a hands-on place for kids just to get to know things. And there was a Channel 6 ABC, which if you're in news, Channel 6 is a leading station in Philadelphia. They had a partnership with the museum to have a small news desk in the museum. And I just remember sitting there and telling my mom, you had to take my picture, you had to take my picture. I thought it was the coolest thing. And
Oh.
from that moment on, getting that firsthand perspective of what it was like to sit behind a news desk and have the weather screen, the green screen right there was just so unique and different. And I just don't think that many kids at a young age get to experience that feeling. And I did. And from that moment on, I told my parents, this is what I want to do. And quite literally, it's the only thing I ever said I wanted to do for my parents. My dad in pharmaceutical sales and my mom in marketing. When I told them I wanted to do TV, they were like, what? My dad would have loved to see me be a doctor or a lawyer. That just wasn't in the cards.
You came out of the womb screaming, news!
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it, yes.
Oh, that's so funny. Were you outgoing as a child? It seems to me that you were. Were you an outgoing kid?
Yeah, yeah. And in school, I was always the talkative one. I wasn't going to a classroom without having a conversation with a friend. And math, science, the science background wasn't necessarily my thing. And I would love to talk more about that, given that I am kind of in the science field on the flip side of things now as someone who came just as a general assignment reporter. But we'll get into that. But yeah, I guess, English, writing, that was always my thing in school, and certainly talking to go along with it was a class in and of itself, I guess.
Screaming news!
Yes.
Okay, so let's fast forward a little bit. So at 5 years old, you knew that this is what you wanted to do. So let's keep moving the timeline along. What happened next? When did you start, deciding, hey, I'm actually going to study this, and so on?
Well, I think it's important to mention, that I was really lucky. It's not often that you get to have a middle school and a high school that both have TV programs, and I had both. And so I was approached in 5th grade by the TV director, you can call it, at the middle school, who had seen me in a talent show in elementary school, who said, you have a great personality. I think that you would be really good for this. And at the time, I had no idea that our schools even had such a thing. But I think the stars essentially aligned there,
Yeah.
where, they had reached out saying, you should do this. And it was a program called Homeroom Headlines that we filmed during the day, and then it would air at the end of the day when the middle schoolers would go back to class before we went out to the school buses to be dismissed. And we would read off things that were happening around school that day. And I loved it so much. And it was really cool. We got the opportunity to not only be in front of the camera, but operate the cameras, write the scripts. We were doing everything in 6th grade. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That transitioned into high school. I did a similar program called Shawnee TV, and beyond that, The school district that I was in fact, had a sideline reporting program for our local TV station. So I was actually reporting on TV starting my freshman year of high school
Wow.
on sports that I knew absolutely nothing about. It was great. And I think that's definitely where it came from, was just middle and high school and getting that experience
Yeah,
that most people would never get to say that they get to do. So it was crazy.
for sure. I did the middle school news as well.
Okay,
I,
nice.
yeah, I have a funny story. So I remember that they got a prompter in middle school, which was like a huge deal. A
Oh, yeah.
prompter in middle school. And we were used to having like scripts, that we read, but now we had a prompter.
Yeah.
Well, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but I forgot my glasses that day and I was
Oh,
anchoring.
bad mistake.
I wear contacts now, by the way. But I remember like squinting so hard, like to see what I had to say. And I just remember like I was certain I was not saying the correct things, okay? So I get back to my 7th or 8th grade classroom and everybody just is cracking up laughing. And I'm like,
No.
"What?" And the teacher's like, "You said," and I'm not exact on this, but she said, "You said something like Alaska became the 34th president of the United States," or something.
See, you weren't thinking in that moment. You just thought, you know what, I'm going to get through this newscast. And you know what? Your training was on par. That's good. You finished
Yeah,
it out, right?
I did. Yeah. Yeah.
Wasn't in the best way.
The stars were aligned, as you say.
Oh, no, that's good. Wait, and it's also crazy to hear, it's not often that you hear from someone that we have the resources, that a school district would have the
Yes.
resources to be able to provide something like that. And it's just not a common field to go into. So the fact that both of us have had that experience that's crazy.
Yeah. So cool. So in high school, then did you decide I'm going to go to journalism school?
Oh yeah, yeah. It was an easy decision for me. Again, maybe not for my parents, who were still a little skeptical of the whole thing, but they obviously knew at this point that I was serious about it. So they were willing to support me, which I'm very grateful for. But I went for broadcast journalism to Emerson College, which is in Boston. And for those that aren't familiar with Emerson, it is a liberal arts school that really focuses in on mainly broadcast journalism, acting, anyone in theater, and video production, I would say, are the biggest. And so it was a school that I knew I'd be able to focus just my talents on, which for me was like the most important thing, again, because I couldn't see myself going to a school where I was studying all the things in high school that I said I'm never going to use this in my life. And so to be able to go to a school where, again, to have that hands-on experience was amazing, and I'm so grateful I went there. Emerson was a great school to go to for journalism. So
And I wanted to talk to you specifically. You may be the youngest person that I've interviewed so far, but the reason I want to interview you is because you've made big strides very quickly in your career. Are you
thank you.
even 30 yet? You're not even 30, right?
29. I turned 29 in March, so 30 next year. I'm just going to
Yes.
hold on to my late 20s as long as possible.
Okay, I'm not going to age you. I'm so sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. You know what? I'm kind of excited. 30 will be good. I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, holding on to my 20s for a while.
Yeah, but you've made some big strides. So where did you go after college?
So I'll give you. I could talk hours about this, but I'll give you kind of just the point by point of where I started and how I got to where I am. But so I went to Peoria, Illinois, to a location in Illinois that I couldn't have even, if you asked me to point it out on a map back then, I would have told you I have no idea where it is. It was a city I had never heard of before. But that's what you do a lot of times in news, and that's just the way. You start, in the middle of nowhere, essentially. I was lucky that Peoria wasn't, quote unquote, in the middle of nowhere. I had Chicago 2 hours one way, St. Louis 2 hours in the middle, the other way. But I started as a morning show reporter there, which was exciting. I knew personally I wanted to be in morning news. I liked the lifestyle, entertainment aspect, where not only could I be doing general assignment news, but also mixing fun with it too. And I thought for a long time that entertainment journalism was what the path I was originally going to take. Things changed when I went to my second station in Allentown, Pennsylvania, WFMZ, which was a cable station in the Lehigh Valley area. And COVID, as many people will say, changed the trajectory of my life. I went from being a morning reporter there, where, again, I was doing a lot of lifestyle entertainment, and quickly realized in the midst of COVID that those entertainment stories were out the window because nothing was happening. And in fact, my day-to-day became breaking news. And so in all of that, I don't know if I guess it could have gone either way. You either love it or you hate it. And I ended up loving the general assignment, hard news. And then that was the path I continued on. I left there. I went to News 12, specifically their station in New Jersey in Edison. I went freelance because I was getting out of a contract with WFMZ, which is very common in news, and was there for about a year before an opportunity came up at Fox 29 in Philadelphia. Still waiting out my non-compete, kind of threw a wrench in things. I had a non-compete with Philadelphia. So once I was able to get to Fox 29, that was like the dream for me, to be able to be in my home city, quote unquote. I grew up in South Jersey, and be reporting news in that fashion was like a dream come true. And if you had asked me a year ago when I was still there, will I go anywhere else? I probably would have said no. I was so happy to be there. I mean, I had the best news director, the best coworkers. And then kind of out of nowhere came this opportunity with AccuWeather. It wasn't something I was pursuing at the time. They had approached me saying that they had an opportunity as a national weather correspondent for AccuWeather to join their team. And for the first time, it was an opportunity that I didn't have to, I don't want to say work for, because everything I've done, I've worked for. But every position I've gotten, I had worked so hard to get. And this was finally the opportunity where they saw something in me, where I didn't have to do the reaching out or the convincing to hire me. They wanted me. And to me, that was the biggest green flag that any company could give. And I said I'd be stupid to pass this opportunity up. So that's the trajectory of how I got from point A to point, what are we now? Point E, point D.
No.
But it was amazing. So,
No, that's great. Did you work at like the figure skating channel at one point too?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So the short version for this is in the midst of COVID, again, when things were going crazy and I was losing my mind a little bit at home while also reporting, I was trying to scratch that itch of, something that I could do that was still fun, that, I was still, that could still, where I wouldn't be breaking any rules in my contract with WFMZ, but I could potentially do something more on the side. And the more I got thinking, I said, my lifelong dream, and still is, by the way, I mean, if the US Figure Skating Association now came to me and they were like, we want you to be the next Tara Lipinski or Johnny Weir, I'd be like, sign me up. But, figure skating was my first love. Before TV, it was figure skating. And, I said to my mom one day on a phone call, I said, would it be crazy just to pitch to them the idea of bringing back a show called The Ice Desk that they once had, which was a social media show that it came and went really fast, but it was a really cool concept where you would travel to qualifying ice skating competitions all around the country. And you'd be reporting in that stadium as to where those big events were. And it ended. And so I pitched to them a new idea, a new concept for the show, and they loved it. And they were like, yeah, actually. And it was really cool for me because it was a qualifying season leading up to the Olympics. And what was it? Tokyo. It was Japan back in 2020, which again seems like a blur, but really cool year to be a part of something like that in one of the most important years that you can be in figure skating. And I sat alongside Mirai Nagasu and Paulina Edmonds, who are two Olympians in figure skating, and we did a news ice skating show, and it was amazing.
Wow.
And things changed, and I wasn't able to continue that for a number of reasons, but gosh, I loved every second of it. It was amazing.
And let's talk about you having the guts to pitch a show to the channel, because that does take a lot of guts. And what would be some of your advice? Because times are changing. A lot of things are going to social media and digital and creation and innovation.
Well, yeah, nothing is the same anymore, right? And back then, and I still look at her as a mentor now, but Deborah Norville, I interned for her back when I was at Inside Edition, who, if you were to ask her, who is quite literally the longest running female TV anchor in the country, her way as to how she got to where she was very point. She worked her butt off to get every opportunity she got. And she got to the point where she was Deborah Norville, reporting and anchoring some of the biggest shows in the country. But I remember she leaned over my desk one day and she was the one that was like, "You're going to take that job in Peoria, right?" I'm like, I don't know, because there was other opportunities where I could have done radio and stayed in New York City. But she was like, "No, you have to have and she gave me the best advice possible, which was you have to be good at the basis of whatever you're doing first before you can do anything else." And so she was like, "Go do the time in Peoria and then expand upon that." And so that was the best advice she could have given me back then. But it's a very traditional way of thinking. And as you said, times have changed. It's very different now. And I'm quickly learning that myself, trying to figure out what's next for me. I mean, that's a great question because there's so many ways that you could take it. But it's all about being innovative and also showing people that if you're passionate about something and you love something enough that you want it to happen, it will happen. Dreams are not just dreams. They can become reality. And that has happened to me. And I'm living proof of that. I pitched this idea because it was a show that I loved, that I thought was a really cool concept, that maybe just needed a little, tweaking. But it was something that I was like, let's work to make it happen. I don't think that that's an unrealistic possibility. And they were willing to hear me out. It was a couple of phone calls and really convincing them to make it happen. But it was, something that I loved, and I think they saw that. They saw that I was passionate about it, and they were willing to take that chance.
Totally. So let's talk about your job at AccuWeather.
Sure.
Where do I start? How often are you on the road? Like, I would ask you what your schedule is like, but I'm sure it is crazy. Tell me about it.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to mention first, that I am a national weather reporter. I'm not a meteorologist, which is funny being on this podcast, right, with the name. But I don't have a science background. And to be honest, I don't think that that's ever something that I want to pursue. I don't think I want to go into meteorology. But this job, I'm essentially the best way when someone asks me, what is it that you do? I'm your eyes and ears in the field. So I'm traveling either before, a lot of times for hurricanes, you're traveling before to be boots on the ground there for when it makes landfall, or post coverage if it's like a tornado or something that may really devastate a community. But I'm your person that's there to be the storyteller. And so that is the difference. And I always feel it's important to mention that because I am not saying anything scientific or anything like that in regards to severe weather, because that's just not my forte, and I don't have the background to speak on a lot of those things. So we leave that to the meteorologists.
But let me stop you. You are not a weather girl, I will tell you. You may not be a meteorologist, but you are not a weather girl. But go on.
Thank you. And I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, I'm a weather reporter, right? I think it's still important to differentiate the two. But yeah, I always think that that's important to mention. But geez, this is a loaded question that you just asked me because my day-to-day can be so different. But I think probably what makes the most sense to say is what my life looks like in severe weather. And to be honest, that could happen like that. I had to be ready for a phone call at any point. And you being out in California, I'm happy to share this story. Obviously you lived through and were surrounded by the wildfires, which happen out there, the devastating wildfires. Mm-hmm. And I had an idea that they would probably call me at some point to get out there to start reporting on it. I just didn't know when or, what that was really going to look like. It was a Sunday. I was actually going on a date with my husband. We're like, I've been traveling so much for work. I'm constantly, I think last year, I want to say when I did the math, it was something like 180-ish days that I had traveled in a year. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, you know what? Let's go on a nice date. It's a beautiful Sunday. We get in the car. We make it like 20 minutes down the road. And I got a text from my boss, Doug, who's amazing. And then I got a second text. and I was the one driving, so my phone was connected to whatever, Apple CarPlay. And my husband Tim looked at me and he's like, do you want to open up your phone to see what he's saying to you? Because there's no reason why he should be texting you multiple times on a Sunday, right? And sure, lo and behold, I open up my phone and he's like, hey, can you hop on a phone call? We need you to actually get on a flight at 7 o'clock tonight out of Newark to get to California to be live and reporting tomorrow morning in California. And so, turn the car around. When I had all of maybe 3 hours to pack my belongings and get to the airport. So it's an on-call, job. I'm constantly on the road traveling for severe weather, and that's the exciting part, but also the hard part, because I'm constantly going to locations that have been hit by the most devastating things you'd ever see in your life. I mean, it's horrible. But
Well, we have a couple things there. One, this would have never happened if you were at home on the couch and completely bored, right? Like, it was going to happen when you were going to a nice, relaxing dinner that you've been looking forward to. That's how it happens.
Always.
Two, you have such a supportive husband. And talk to me about that and his commitment to this crazy lifestyle that you have.
I think it's totally a balance, because he is, your normal worker. He works for Johnson & Johnson, normal. I mean, he has an amazing job, right? Doing amazing things for an amazing company. But,
right.
He lives the normal 9-to-5 lifestyle. And, I think when we've been together 5 years, married 1, and, I think pretty quickly he realized what he was getting himself into. It's not for the faint of heart. I'm sure your husband can understand too. Like, I think what works in our relationship is the fact that we have 2 very different jobs. He is the guy that's doing the 9-to-5, the relatively normal, quote unquote, job. And so for him, he wakes up in the morning, he goes to work, he comes home. And I don't think I know this for a fact, that I don't think he ever would have thought that he would end up with someone like me. I guess it was in his cards, but I don't think that he ever thought that it was going to be. And, it's a lot of give and take. It's a lot for him, but he also realizes that this is what I love, and he loves me. So he's happy that I love what I love, and he's always been very supportive of that. So I think you can't sugarcoat it. It's certainly hard. I mean, it's not an easy thing on any relationship to be dumping out on dates and saying, I'm sorry, we can't do this anymore for today, and we'll have to put a pin in it before we can go on this date again. Who is crazy to say to my husband, but I think he understands it's not forever, that the next opportunity will come, and that'll be different, and it'll evolve in its own ways. And he knows that this is a job that I couldn't pass up, and he was willing to go along for the ride with it too. And shout out to our husbands, because it's not talked about enough. It's not easy to do. It's just not. This industry, it's not easy.
As a correspondent, those little games that people play where they're like, what's in your bag? What's in your correspondent bag? Like, what is in that bag when they call and you're like, okay, I got to get out the door. I got to get, somewhere really quick.
Well, typically, actually, it's funny that I wore this today, because usually I'm wearing, I'll pack like a couple of denim type shirts. Those are easy, something breathable. I mean, not that denim is very breathable, but something that is a little bit more breathable, that you're not going to be, a lot of times you're going to places that are very hot, might be rainy. The weather usually isn't great wherever you're going for coverage. So, something that's just easy to travel with. I constantly have just undershirts that are kind of like this one, like a black tee, but also, I always have a separate bag packed that has all of your hair ties, because there's no way that you're standing in the middle of a hurricane with your hair down. Like, it's just not happening. I would love for that to be the case, but, in severe weather, my hair is going back. So,
have you ever done a live shot, which I have, where pretty much all they see is hair? Hair everywhere. And it's like, yeah, my face is somewhere, I swear.
Yeah. Too many times to count, unfortunately. And I have very frizzy, chaotic hair that's, it doesn't hold up very well in severe weather, unfortunately. So it's usually getting put up in a ponytail. And with that, I usually have pretty what do you like thick hairspray too, because I constantly am needing that. But yeah, a good hair products, breathable clothing, I would say, and then all of I am the one that travels with all of the camera equipment because my photographer lives in Asheville, North Carolina. And so when I meet up, or and there we have different photographers that sit all over the country. So depending on who I'm working with, it's just always easier for me to have the gear to meet up with them. So not only am I traveling with just clothes and basic necessities like that to get to where I'm going, but I also am bringing quite literally all of our equipment, from cameras to lighting, audio, Starlink, which has saved our lives time and time again. Without Starlink, we wouldn't be able to be live or be on location half the time because we're in areas that don't have cell service. So it's a heavy load, but every single time it's over 50 pounds for at least one of my bags. It's a lot of stuff, but I try to pack my own personal things as light as possible, and carry-ons usually if I can, to make it as simple for myself.
Yeah. Also, your live shots are great. You're really, really proficient at live shots. Do you have any tips for journalists and aspiring journalists on how they can nail those? Because you've been doing live shots for a long time and they're really strong.
Well, again, I think it goes, consistency is key, right? So just doing it for a long time. I mean, I could look back to my stuff in Illinois and I'm like, oh, I cringe at some of that stuff. But you have to start somewhere, right? And you have to consistently do it to get better at it. So I think that's the first piece of advice. Like, don't give up on yourself. Because if you do, you're never going to get to the point that you want to. Take the advice of others. It's great to have mentors, and it's also great to just have good connections in this industry. Sure, I mean, everyone likes a yes man, but it's way better to have someone that could sit there and be like, okay, no, maybe you need to change this up, or how you're saying it needs to evolve. And I couldn't even tell you how many people over the years that I've had where I've had conversations and they're like, and it's just little tweaks here and there. Because if you try and do everything at once, it's not going to happen for you. So it needs to be over a steady period of time. And then I personally think the most important thing is, you don't have to be a reporter. Again, we're talking about like the tradition of news reporting has evolved so much. And back then, I think it was the prim and proper reporter that was looked at as like, the person that you watch on TV. And, and no shame to anyone that still wants to hold themselves to that regard. I think that's fantastic. But I think there's a whole new wave of reporters that are coming in now that are like, yes, we still need to be prim and proper to a certain extent, right? Be as professional as we possibly can in this industry. But I think it's also kind of accepted now to be ourselves and to show that side of us. And so I haven't been afraid to bring my personality into things. And so when I'm giving a report, I am not the one that's going to be sitting there in this strong voice giving a report. I'm there and I'm going to be as real as I possibly can, talking to the people in the field and just sharing it as I see it. And that's how I've always looked at being a reporter, because that to me is really important, to show my true self. And I hope that I can carry that with me through the rest of my career. That's always been very important to me. So another loaded question, but so much advice I could give. But
Amen. Yeah. So good. Do you bullet point when you do live shots and you're having a script and you're covering certain details? Do you bullet point them out?
I think it depends. If it's a planned live shot, sure, yes. I want to be as consistent as I possibly can. But as you know, in breaking news, and that's evolving as quickly as it is, in severe weather, a lot of times there are no bullet points. It's you're being thrown into a scenario and you got to rock it and roll with it. And so I think it really depends. And for me, I always, at least a few minutes before, try and get an idea in my head as to what I feel the most important information is to start that live shot off, and then work my way down. And a lot of times, again, with severe weather, it's just explaining to viewers at home what's happening around me. And I feel that has worked well. And I'm also grateful for producers that let me run sometimes for 5-minute live shots. And if you're familiar in news, that is a long amount of time, usually when you're being cut at 1:30, sometimes less. So I'm grateful for that too, because they let me talk, which is good. which is good.
Yeah, absolutely. So is there a crazy story moment that really sticks out to you that you've experienced covering the correspondent world, the reporter world? Any story that sticks out to you?
Well, again, it's another one of those things where I could take this in a million different directions, but I think the best way to answer this is, to be honest, one that has stuck with me the last couple of weeks because it's the most recent, which is when I was in Kentucky a few weeks ago now for the EF4 tornado that hit London, Kentucky, very small town outside of Lexington. And that reporting, by the way, on post coverage, yes, when you're traveling for hurricanes, for example, right, we can get an idea of what that's going to look like sometimes weeks out. In tornadoes, sometimes you have minutes to get somewhere when a tornado is coming through your town. And unfortunately, this town, London, Kentucky, it was roughly about midnight when this tornado hit. How scary is that? You're having a major EF4 tornado come through your town in the middle of the night. You've got no notice. And just imagine the devastation that brought. I mean, it was horrific, right? But no matter, and I say this every single time, no matter where I go, where devastation has hit, you meet the most amazing humans everywhere. And it is cause for amazing stories because you meet the most amazing people. And it's hard and it's difficult, right? Because I'm going in as the outsider, right? I don't know these people. They don't know me. And I don't expect them to come at me with open arms when they've just lost everything. I think that would be crazy to think that way. But 9.9 times out of 10, these people are turning to me and they want to welcome me and they want to share their story. And I think that is just so admirable. In fact, I was walking through one of these neighborhoods in Kentucky, and this family had asked me if I wanted water. Meanwhile, I was actually going around asking families if they wanted water. I always bring a pack of water with me wherever I go because I feel that's important. I think safety and that whole aspect of making sure that wherever I'm going, that the people there are safe first is more important than getting a story or shoving a camera in someone's face. But it led to a great conversation. And in the midst of that conversation, the family had told me this, horrible story, but with a good outcome, which was their neighbors across the street in the middle of the tornado, husband and wife, hugging each other. They had quite literally seconds. They did get a ping on their phone that a tornado was coming through and that they were in the direct path of it. And they turned to each other and said, "I love you." They hugged each other. They embraced each other. The tornado hit. All of their arms got torn off in the tornado. Okay, I know that sounds really horrific to hear, but they're alive. They're alive, and I have like goosebumps telling this story, and I haven't thought of this story since it, but it makes you emotional. It is crazy to think, as many deaths as there were in the state of Kentucky because of that tornado, there was so many survivor stories. And it's not undermining the deaths. And they were absolutely horrific, hearing some of those stories. But when you hear the survivor stories, it makes you feel some sort of hope. And I share that story with you because I do think that they, in that moment, did everything they possibly could to save themselves. And at the end of the day, they were like, okay, if this is going to be how we go out, we're going out together. And they survived it. It was amazing. They're both still in the hospital, but as far as I know, they're stable and they're doing as best as they can given the scenario. So, yeah, and by the way, I hear stories like that all the time, wherever I'm going. But that is the most recent from what I covered, most recently. And I don't know if I'll ever forget that, to be honest. That's just, top of the list.
Wow.
Yeah.
In covering these type of stories that you said you cover quite frequently, how do you maintain that balance? Because, like I've mentioned in previous podcasts, you have to protect your heart,
Yeah, I think it's a switch in a lot of ways, but unfortunately, that switch can be very blurry and not defined. I always try and keep it, work is work, personal life is personal life. And I do try and keep that at least as the basis of how I do things. Of course, it's not going to be that way always. And then you hear stories like what I just shared, and you're like, how, my mom would say, like, how are you not a sobbing mess? Well, yeah, you take a few moments to cry and to let that out. But I always try and do that on my personal time, because I always have to try and remember, at the end of the day, I am going home to my husband, and this is a job for me. And so I think it's really, really important to differentiate the two. But I also think that you have to go into these stories with grace and compassion, because that's the only way to go about these stories. So it's a fine line, and it's a very delicate balance, but one that I think is so important to continue in this job. It's not an easy one.
For someone that wants to become a correspondent, what piece of advice would you give for them?
Always be yourself. And I think that's the most important. But be yourself, even if that's in a silly, fun way. Keep it professional. Also remember that this industry is very small. Everyone knows everyone. So use that to your advantage. A lot of people look at that as like a disadvantage. Oh, everyone knows everyone. But use that to your advantage. I mean, how I met Ginger Z, who is a huge mentor of mine, was simply because I had tweeted her years ago saying, I was reading her book. I don't know if you haven't read it, read it. It's amazing.
It's amazing.
And and in that book, what I took away, the most important thing, was that Ginger has always been herself, always. And I was like, if the chief meteorologist of one of the biggest networks in the country can be herself, then little old me can do the same too. And again, times have changed. It's very different on how you get to becoming the chief meteorologist of a major network, but she did it by being herself. And so I think the biggest advice, go into it, whatever place you go, be yourself, be professional, make the connections, because that's going to work to your advantage. And I don't know, chase your dreams, because without dreams, there's no reality, in my opinion. People can argue that, but every dream of mine has become reality so far. And so I'm just going to keep pushing that for myself.
Do you find that you're very future focused? Because, and I don't say that in a bad way, because I think it's gotten you to where you are so quickly, but I'm somebody that tends to ride the future focused wave, and I think you do too. Is it hard for you to stay in that, like, I'm good, like, I'm enjoying the journey,
Yeah. Yeah, it is so hard. In fact, my grad cap in college literally said, because I was like, I have to tell myself this. On my grad cap, it said, live in the moment. Because I am constantly someone that can't live in the moment. It's so hard because I'm always looking towards the future. And I'm constantly reminding myself that it's okay to be where you are. But yeah, I'm always someone that looks toward the future. And I think what's scary now, and I'm sure you can agree, and many people can agree, news is changing so quickly. And I don't know, and I don't think anyone knows, where news is really going to end up the next couple of years. I mean, when I first got into this industry 7, almost 8 years ago, it has vastly changed from what it is now. I mean, MMJs, they were just being talked about back then in college. I mean, it really wasn't a thing. And now all you hear is MMJs and reporting on your own and doing solo live shots, which is a crazy concept. But
I've done it. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. It is. And, these stations are expecting so much of reporters now. But, yeah, I think the future is loaded. I don't know exactly where I go from here, but I do know that wherever I go next, which I just re-signed again with AccuWeather. So I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. I'm hanging it out. I love my job and I'm happy to be here. But it'd be silly to say that it's not forever. I do see myself moving on and going somewhere else in the future, wherever that may be. But whether that's traditional news landscape or not, I don't know, because so much has changed. But I think that's the exciting part of this job, is that no day is ever the same, and certainly not, in this type of job. And so I think I'm going to try, instead of letting it be scary, I'm going to let it be as exciting as it possibly can be moving forward, because I think that's just there's so much to look forward to in the future. So I'm happy where I'm at right now, and we'll see. It's a big question mark, I guess, for now, what happens next, but happy to be here currently.
And that's why I say you're not a weather girl, because you are a weather reporter, you're a correspondent, you're a wife, you're a friend. You do so many things and you're so talented at so many things. So
Yeah.
never undermine your talents because they are certainly there.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah, it's a lot of hard work, but it's a lot of fun. And I love my life. I love my job. And I hope that whatever happens next, that continues. So
All right, Allie, are you ready for the quick fires?
let's do it.
Okay. If I weren't a journalist, I would be
Quick fire.
interior designer. Interior
Yeah.
designer.
Maybe, yes, interior designer, or something in space.
Really?
Or archaeology. I have always said space or history and like artifacts, I think would be really cool. I don't know. Something like that.
Interesting. Your coffee order.
Oh, always an iced latte, usually with lavender and a sprinkle of honey in it.
Ooh, I love a lavender latte too.
The best.
Your
Keeps me awake.
favorite? Yeah, that's true. Your favorite travel destination?
Japan. Yeah, it was, and the fact that I just got back from there, best place in the world. Oh my God, the people, the places, amazing. Japan.
Was it your first time going?
First time and definitely not last. We have already talked about we want to go back. Whether or not that happens in the next couple of years, I don't know. But it's on the list to go back for sure.
Amazing. It's on my bucket list, but I have not been yet.
You got to go. Yeah, put it on the top for sure.
Okay. Something people often get wrong about you.
That I'd be good at public speaking. I am so bad at or not bad. I'm just terrified of it. I'm terrified.
Really?
And the reason I say that is because when you're live, usually it's one or two people that are there, right? And so you're talking to a camera lens. But in the midst of a crowd of 50, 100 plus whatever people, that is so jarring to me. And I just had to do it. I was a maid of honor in my best friend's wedding. She just got married a few weeks ago. And I was shaking. I couldn't control the nerves. So yeah, contrary to belief, I am terrified of public speaking as a TV reporter.
Interesting. No, it makes total sense. But it's funny. I tend to get more nervous if it's like a group of like 20 because they're closer to you. Like if
more
it's like
intimate.
yeah. Like if it's like a big crowd, I feel like, oh, it's just like a wish-wash. Like I can talk to these people. But if it's like 20, like I'm in a group meeting having to pitch a story, I'm like, oh, fuck.
Anything more than like 5, I am like, all right, I'm good. I feel you on that. It's scary. Yeah, I've never been a public speaker. I'm not
So funny. We're all more
good at it
similar
either.
than different. That's
Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure. The last movie, TV show, or book you watched and loved?
Oh, easy answer. If you haven't seen it, totally recommend. It's called The Wild Robot. Have you seen it yet?
No.
Ah. Ooh, okay.
Where
So here's
is
what I'm
it?
gonna do. I might be on Netflix now. I don't know. It's on one of them for sure. I don't know if it's Netflix, Hulu, whatever. But one of them for sure has it. And it's an animated movie. I'll start off with that because you're like an animated movie. But
I have a 3-year-old. Can a 3-year-old
Oh.
watch this?
oh yeah. And it's meant for anyone. But
Okay.
I personally think that it is specifically geared towards people in our age range because it goes through the stages of life. And it's so deep for an animated movie. And if you haven't seen it, it's great. I think it should win every award under the planet. It's great. It's great. It's great. Just watch
Okay, I'm going to watch it. I'm going to look for it this week for sure.
it. Good.
We have Pizza Friday night with our daughter, and we're always looking for an animated movie that I'm also not sick of at this point. So.
This is a perfect one. I'm not kidding. It's great.
Perfect. A snapshot of an ordinary everyday moment that gives you true joy.
Honestly, just being probably just waking up and going outside. As long as it's a sunny day, we love a sunny day. But it always brings me joy. Fresh air. I think that's the best way. You know, we have a deck now, which is the first time I've had a deck of our size in our backyard. Oh, I spend a lot of time out there. It's like my happy place.
Didn't you just buy a house?
Yeah, we just bought a house this past year and my interior decorating. has come to, full fruition here. But yeah, lots of time out on the back deck for sure. I love fresh air, sunny days.
If you could switch lives with one person for a day, who would it be?
I don't know, like George Washington, maybe. I just think it would be really cool to not only go back in time to, which was the most pivotal time in American history, right? But also just get a glimpse as to what that would look like. I think that would be so crazy and cool. And who wouldn't want to be president for the day? I think that would be awesome. So maybe George Washington. I don't know. Was it supposed to be alive? I mean, if it was alive. If it was alive, I would probably say Ginger. I mean, I just love her so much.
Oh.
I think, and her job and I are very similar in many ways, and I see her a lot out in the field. So if it was alive, Ginger.
I've gotten the gamut of people, so
Yeah.
both work for sure.
Okay.
One thing you're deeply grateful for right now.
My job. Yeah, for sure. My job. If it wasn't for this opportunity, I don't know where I'd be right now. But it was the fact that, again, they reached out to me for something that was certainly not on my plate. I mean, if you ever said to me even 2, 3 years ago that I was going to end up being a national weather correspondent, I would have told you you were insane. But it was worth taking the risk, and I'm so happy to be on this crazy ride. So, yeah, my job.
Last question, Allie. If you could go back in time to when you first started your career, what piece of advice would you give yourself?
No, it's always stayed the same, and I'll continue to say this. I think you just have to be yourself. I in middle high school, not that I don't want to go as far as to say that I was like bullied constantly for my love of TV, but certainly I was made fun of it a lot for being the girl who, and again, I was the only girl in a TV tech class filled with boys who wanted to do video production. And so I was always the girl that was the outsider, the one like, oh, it's so weird. She knows what she wants to do. Like, that was weird in high school. As we know, that's just how that was a high schooler's brain. But I didn't care. I was like, okay, fine, make fun of me. Go ahead, see where that gets you, because it lit a fire. And yeah. I don't know. I think I just would have said to myself, like, just be yourself, because that has gotten me to this point. So yeah, just stay true to yourself.
Allie, this was fantastic. Such a great advice for aspiring journalists and journalists in our industry. Where can people find you right now if they want to watch you on AccuWeather and also follow your social media accounts?
Yeah, social media, it's as simple as it can be. Allie Reid TV on everything, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, you name it. I keep it all the same. So that's the simplest. On AccuWeather, please watch. It's amazing. And again, with the ever-changing tide, yes, we are still on cable, but you can find us on most digital streaming platforms, Roku, Amazon TV, you name it, we're there. Find us. It's a great place to be.